Hello again, I'm Doug Smith. This is the 23 June 2014 edition of Portsmouth This Week, the voice of Portsmouth Town Hall. Our special guests here today are Jay Edwards, the representative for District 7, and Chris Ottiano, the senator representing District 11. And welcome, gentlemen. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
I think it's a very fortuitous time for you guys to come back, and we'll get into that. You were here a couple months ago, back in February, and it seems like so long ago when this whole process of the budget and the infrastructure plan and everything else were coming together. It looks as though your efforts have been successful and are about to be crowned with a real victory here. Can you give us an update on where we are on the current status of the infrastructure part of the budget, particularly?
Well, the infrastructure bill, including the budget, passed the House last night, literally just hours ago. So the infrastructure is part of the budget, and right now it's passed the House, and it's going to make its way over to our colleagues in the Senate.
Yep.
In which case you guys will pass it?
Correct.
Right?
Well, the Senate Finance Committee will hear it and move it on Monday afternoon, and then we should be voting that on the floor Monday evening.
Okay. So it's all look good, and we keep our fingers crossed. Let me get into some of the details, but I guess we seem to be so close. We're like days away from this thing becoming law.
We can taste it.
Yeah.
I bet you can. And is there any surprises or potential surprises that could happen that you guys have thought of?
Well, the machinery could break like it did last night in the House just before the vote.
Yes, technology fails when you really need it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll just keep our fingers crossed. But let's go back and maybe recap, if you would, the main components of the current version of what we have in terms of the infrastructure part of the bill.
I think in very broad terms, what do conservatives love to hear? What do we all like to hear about our budget? We found a way to commit money to the things that needed to be spent on, infrastructure, all of the state roads, without any major tax increases, without a substantial amount of new borrowing. It's a commitment. And again, it starts with a great budget that our whip from the House here helped to put together. That's a commitment from them, and certainly that's why the Senate, I don't think, will have any problems agreeing with that.
Okay, one of the things we talked about at length last time were the nuts and bolts, if you like, of the components of the funding for this program. And we talked about things like increased fees slightly for vehicle inspections. Is that still in the bill? Is that still part of it?
The biannual inspection has been increased from $39 to $55. So it's an $8 increase every year, but it's a biannual increase. We moved all of your licensing fees. We had already increased them previously. All that money is going to go into the Infrastructure Trust Fund.
Okay, that went into the general fund previously?
Everything went into the general fund. Now it's going to go into the Infrastructure Trust Fund.
Okay.
We also increased the good drivers record. If you get caught speeding, now you can you pay court costs, and you can pay a $25 fee to have your record cleaned, so your insurance company doesn't get it. That will now cost you $50. It's still a great deal because your insurance company is going to hit you for a lot more.
Okay. Gas tax?
We indexed it, so it's going to, starting in fiscal 2016, next year, it will be indexed, basically following the CPI, and we're anticipating about a 1 cent increase next year.
Okay, and that'll continue to rise or fall with the CPI?
Every 2 years it'll be adjusted.
Okay, that's great. So that'll help going forward. What about the Rhode Island Bridge and Transport Authority? I know when we originally were discussing this, you had talked about kind of doing away with them and putting their functions back into DOT. Where is that now? Is that anywhere?
Actually, the Turnpike and Bridge Authority is going to remain intact. They are going to maintain the 4 bridges, and part of the Infrastructure Trust Fund is going to actually be allocated to the Turnpike and Bridge Authority so that we don't have a toll on the Secaucus Bridge. That's permanently removed. And then also we are supplementing the tolls for the Pell Bridge, so there won't be an increase on those bridges either.
Okay. So it all looks good going forward. I'm wondering where's the downside. I don't see any. And this is unique, I think, in Rhode Island. Okay, so that's what the bill looks like. That's where it is. Everybody's more or less agreed on it. You have 62 voted for, 11 voted against, and now it's moved. Where does it go now, and what are the next steps?
Well, the Senate Finance Committee will hear it on Monday, and given when this is airing, that might have already passed. But then it'll come right to the Senate floor, where same idea. It has to pass by a 2/3 vote in the Senate, and I don't suspect that that'll be a problem.
You vote as a block, though. You vote the entire block.
Correct. That's a great point. For anyone who likes staying up late at night watching this stuff on television, God help you if you do. But it is interesting that the House and Representative Edwards is fresh off of a long night there, getting home well past midnight, because they go through each individual article and then the whole budget. In the Senate, it is one vote, up or down, the whole budget, its entirety, and that's always challenging on both sides, because and you hear people debate this all the time. Sometimes there's one item in the budget you don't like, but it's outweighed by something else that is very, very important. And certainly this year for us, it could not ever be more true. Our constituents have been telling us for how long? So for us, voting for this budget is simply, by definition, our goal here.
Yeah, and I think people need to realize that I think government was defined by someone as the art of compromise, which I think you need to do to keep things moving forward, keep everybody at least sort of happy. But this is a major coup for you guys, and I can't tell you how much we're proud of you for doing this stuff. This is so great.
Well, it was a real community effort. We had the support of our constituents. We had our colleagues. I mean, everyone in this area has a little piece to play in this. So everyone in the entire area can take credit for this.
This program actually will air probably this weekend. It'll be up there in Channel 18, I think, Cox Channel 18. The official time is next week, but it'll come up before then. And I guess the final question, if we can, and it may not be the final one, but is there anything the public needs to do to, put a lock on this thing, or is it done?
As far as the public's concerned, there's nothing really they can do.
So we don't need to write anybody or call the governor's office or anything else, right?
No, even the governor, I think, will sign this.
Okay, super. That's great. We'll keep our fingers crossed, and I'm hoping it'll work. But this is Rhode Island,
All right.
so we're kind of used to,
This is Rhode Island having turned the corner.
Yeah.
Great, I love it, and moving forward. That's
Moving
what we
forward.
should be thinking about. Okay, so that's a big issue: the toll issue, the infrastructure funding. What are some of the other key issues going on over there? There are obvious things: the single lever vote, the ethics bill, et cetera, et cetera. What are some of the other ones that are keeping you guys occupied?
Well, we included in the budget, you have the, we got rid of the cliff for the estate tax. We dropped the corporate tax from 9% to 7%. We set up some funding for lead paint prevention and also for homelessness. So I mean, there's a little bit of things in there for like almost every avenue in Rhode Island. Overall, I think it's a really, really good budget.
Okay, what about the ethics bill, and how do you guys? What is your take on it, and how do you see that playing out?
We just voted on this yesterday in the Senate, and if I could frame sort of the debate that was occurring, was that while the goal was to put the teeth back in this and have the Ethics Commission be able to have more control over and to prosecute more, the sticking point was, do legislators are they held to that same accountability based upon the speech and debate clause? And there was a fantastic debate, if anyone gets to watch it, between a lot of the members of our chamber who are attorneys and who and what. Because remember, this ethics is not just about the people who sit at the State House. It's about every person serving everywhere, the planning boards, the commissions, the town council chambers. The final result was there were some amendments placed in to make it so that, to take out some of the selective nature of it, but ultimately it passed. It passed unanimously.
That's coming over to the House.
Okay, so it's got some hope of being, now is it stronger, do you think, in terms of, keeping the pressure on and making everything perfectly clear?
I think it's stronger than what we have, which is basically nothing.
It'll probably never be perfect because it's a squishy area, I think, but the stronger we can make it, I think the better from a public perspective, at least. Getting off but maybe related to the ethics bill is the recent shakeup with the state leadership. And I think it's actually been very good for the East Bay, because I think we have leadership such as yours, Jay, but Rep. Gallison and others are now in leadership positions. And I think, will that translate, do you think, into maybe people paying more attention to the East Bay generally?
I think it already has. I mean, if you look, we've got the infrastructure as part of the budget. We've gotten a lot of initiatives. I mean, Deborah Giro got her estate tax added into the budget. So, I mean, a lot of initiatives coming out of the East Bay on the House side that are really being looked at and being completed.
Oh, good on you, is all I can say. So it's a long time coming. Our perspective has been that they're very Providence-centric up there. But hopefully that's changing with you guys, and I hope it'll help you all do more for us and your constituents. Assuming that, and it looks like a done deal, I keep saying this, but I'm sorry. Assuming everything works well, what are your next big challenges that you guys see? Once you say, okay, that's done, now what are the next serious things you guys are going to take on?
Other than there's a lot of local issues we need to look at, and Senator Ottiano and I work really closely on a lot of the local issues, especially DEM.
DEM, yeah.
For me personally, I think the quasi groups need to be really looked at.
Is it quasi-governmental groups?
Yes,
Oh.
and you have 21 of them, and really only 2 of them have any serious oversight right now. The Airport Authority, because the FAA is involved, and then NBC, Narragansett Bay Commission, because the EPA is over them. But all the rest of them seem to be almost running amok. I say running with scissors all the time, but they're out there doing pretty much what they want to do. And I think that is one of the biggest issues we need to address.
Yeah, to have some adult supervision somewhere along the line, I think would be a good thing.
I would also throw in there another issue is renewable energy. And it's not just from a standpoint of, yes, in renewable energy, everyone can agree we need to work on that, but it has some implications upon the cost of energy. And I'd imagine you probably get the same letters. There's a lot of debate going on about how can you foster that idea, how can you get more renewable energy, whether it's solar or whether it's wind, but at the same time, some of the programs feed this energy back into the system at a higher cost and raise the energy cost now, and we have lots of constituents who are concerned about that. So I think appropriate, reasonable use of renewable energy is going to be a big one for our state.
Yeah, locally, of course, I think we took a great step forward by agreeing that we should fix our wind turbine and getting up and operating. And any financial support that you guys can come up with to help us defray some of this stuff would be deeply appreciated. But
The town council has already made that very clear.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
You know, speaking of the town council, I know I'm not quite sure what the date was, but you guys met with our town council and they gave you a list of their legislative priorities. I'm sure you guys can hardly remember what those were, but have you been able to accomplish anything along those lines, the things that the town had asked you to do generally?
We've killed the toll.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that was a big one. That was the
that's
big
the
one, of course. That was number one, I think.
Well, I'm hoping that, you know, the elimination of the toll, again, thinking bigger from an infrastructure standpoint, like every municipality in the state, the condition of the roads, you know, the towns can only do so much. They build on the base that the DOT does. So as this money flows back, as this program gets started, I think that's something sizable. You know, the towns are still struggling with the idea of the education funding formula.
Yeah.
You know, this has been in effect now, if I'm correct, for roughly 5 to 6 years. You know, and while the state is holding up its end of the bargain by funding it appropriately, there's still a lot of questions. Regionally, we're here to talk about Portsmouth, but I also represent part of Bristol. The Bristol Warren
Absolutely.
School System has some substantial issues with it. Portsmouth has some issues with it. And of course, we always hear about DCYF and what's happening with that funding. Students coming into places like Boys Town, getting put into our school system. We don't know how many, you know, and these funding issues are significant.
I mean, both Tiverton and Portsmouth and Bristol, they were all really grossly affected by the school funding formula. They all took major hits.
Yeah, and it continues is the problem. And so going forward, you try to come up with a school budget, you're taking multiple thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars of hits every year that the town or somebody's got to make up. And it's
The one
tough.
good thing about it is that it is predictable. They know every year what they're going to get.
Yeah, it is, and I think it requires close management, which I think we're getting now, I think, in our town. But you're right, it takes some management skills. You can't just give everybody what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, of course, you guys are in the business of trying to do that, at least. Yeah, I think the main thing is I'll be very interested to see when the next, we have our own elections. Are you, either one of you, by the way, up for election?
We both are.
Okay.
Both are.
Well, this is a shoo-in. Come on. Vote for these guys, folks.
Nothing's ever
Yeah,
sure,
nothing-
never
yeah.
ever take it
Yeah.
for granted.
Yeah.
But next year, if you go before the council, I'll make a list so I can ask you the right questions and this stuff, and we'll go through a checklist at the end of the year, perhaps. I guess is it too early to talk about next year? You guys are you just spent all night in session. I realize that's probably the most vibrant thing in your mind right now. But how do you think we're doing generally in terms of money and the way it looks to me like we're sort of taking control now of our budget thanks to you guys.
I think
Going forward.
with the new leadership in the House, getting along very well with the Senate President,
Yes.
I think that both chambers are going to continue to work towards the jobs and the economy. And the House has made that a commitment, and I know the Senate President is on board with that. I mean, the entire legislative part of our government is trying to make that happen. We've addressed portions of it this year, and I think next year what we really need to start looking at is the out years, the structural deficits that we've developed, and ways to solve those.
Yeah, I think the main thing is to look for ways and not keep ignoring it, which seems to me has been the general rule around here on almost all of this stuff. That's why I'm delighted to see leaders like yourselves stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, we can't just keep playing these games. We have to come up with a solution, and there may be some painful parts to it.
There is no free ride.
Yeah, there's no free
That's the
ride,
bottom
yeah,
line. And
yeah.
people, I think the people get it. But a lot of times you'll see some of our colleagues, they're always looking for that little silver bullet. It's easy. We'll take all the lead paint money. We'll take all the tobacco money, and we'll make these things go away. And then those monies are gone.
Yeah. It's always unintended consequences down the road that end up biting you in some of these
Well,
quick fixes.
we're trying to look at the unintended consequences now and go around them so that we're not kicking the can down the road constantly and borrowing for our future.
And I think the town of Portsmouth is looking in the same direction, I think. I think at last we're kind of pulling it together and saying, hey, we've got to fix this stuff. And I think Town Administrator John Klimm has done a great job, and the current council, Jim Seventy's leadership, has done a great job of moving this needle to the right a little bit. So we're getting there. Anything else you'd like to tell our viewers? We have 10 minutes. I can't believe we've already discussed the key thing. And you guys are usually going way over time, so here's a chance,
No, I think that, if anyone's looking here, of course, people in Portsmouth are going to talk about the toll and the infrastructure. But take a look at the whole aspect of the budget. It is a good budget. It has a lot in there. There's so much. The Hospital Association is extremely happy. They were originally looking at some substantial cuts. That got restored. Overall, it's a conservative budget, I think, and I think it brings people to the middle, and it addresses, like you're saying, there's no one fix. There's also no quick fix, and it has been a learning experience for me in that Portsmouth is a lot like our entire state. You could look in socioeconomics at the person in Portsmouth who's making $5 million a year and the person in Portsmouth who's working at minimum wage, which right now is we're about to try and raise that, working for $18,000 a year. And those two people both have to be served by our town and our state. There's the challenge. Finding something that works appropriately for everyone. And it's look at the big picture. Step back for a second. We all know what we want, but think about what everyone needs.
Yeah, the good for the community is both locally and as a whole. I think you're absolutely right. You have to think about that, and that's a new concept, I think, for many people. One of the issues that's come up nationally very recently, it's been around for a long time, is the issue of mental health and what are we doing enough? What are we doing? And it's related. I do some work with the Portsmouth Prevention Coalition. It's related to drug and alcohol abuse. It's related to all of these things. You see this, Chris, in your real job. Are there things that we could do in the state? Because I was reading an editorial, I think it was might have been in the Providence Journal just the other day, about how we've sort of let gun laws run amok, and we're getting these shootings and things by people who are obviously mentally unstable and untreated. I mean, and Rhode Island, knock wood, is one of the few states that hasn't had this kind of an incident. Is this something you might get into later on in terms of medical issues?
A good group in both chambers who have already really addressed this. I mean, we have Deborah Giro on the House side. And
It was chaired by Senator Cole Rumsey.
Cole Rumsey on the Senate side, yeah. So they've brought legislation forward to really increase the amount of money that we have for mental health and bring parity between the mental health and your basic physical health, so that your insurances will cover mental health as well as they cover your regular physical health.
Yeah, and I think that, along with the Affordable Care Act, might give it allow people who don't have the funds or a job can still qualify for that and get some assistance. It's a public safety issue, among other things.
I don't really think the guns are the issue, though. I mean, you mentioned that our gun laws are really run amok. Rhode Island has very, very strict gun laws, probably the 8th or 9th in the country.
Yeah.
I think the issue that we really need to address is the mental health part of it.
Yeah,
because
I
you look
agree.
at most of these people, they're buying the guns legally.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I just think as long as the gun laws are being adhered to. Same thing with medical marijuana. I think as long as the purpose and the laws are such that it's being used in the right way, it shouldn't be an issue. I think the perception is that by having a medical marijuana facility in Portsmouth, for example, is that increases the availability of things to the general public, and I'm not convinced yet that that's the truth.
I would much rather have it coming out of a facility that you can actually monitor, as opposed to having right now, you have a lot of people who are growing it at home for caregivers.
Yeah,
and that's I think where a lot of this extra marijuana comes from.
Yeah, that's a tough issue because when I'm sitting in these coalition meetings, I'm kind of conflicted because I just, I can see a need for medical marijuana. If I was old and had an injury that I was in pain all the time, I can see a need for that.
Or young.
Or young. I'm just saying old because I'm old. But absolutely, I mean, I can see a medical need for that. I guess the concern is that it gets abused like everything else we do.
But I don't think you're not the only one who's confused. As a society, we're confused. We've got an attorney general in Washington who, if he wanted to, could raid any place here in the dispensaries because it's still illegal from a federal point.
The law hasn't changed, yeah.
And the idea, I imagine they're going through this in Colorado or here, any place where there's a discrepancy only separated by a state border, that wreaks havoc. Can you imagine the little towns just outside the border of Colorado and what's going on there where it's illegal, but it's legal as soon as you cross this line? And the same thing in Rhode Island, where it's legal medically, but it's not legal for recreational use. And how are you getting it and in what form? People still are thinking about it has to be smoked, whereas actually now it's edible, there's oils and pills. So it is confusing.
The idea of marijuana-laced brownies somehow sounds interesting to taste, but I'm not sure I have to say that when I was a kid, beer was our drug of choice, and I was lucky. I never got into the other stuff. But our kids today, one of the things that we've seen in a recent survey, I don't know if you've been briefed yet on this recent survey we did here in Portsmouth, is number one, the number of kids, and we're talking about middle school on, the number of boys and girls who are doing this stuff. And again, I think a lot of it is just education. One of the problems I have, for example, Chris, and I'll blame you for this, you're part of the medical system, is that we need some coherent studies that either show marijuana's will fry your brain or not. Yeah. And the problem is there's conflicting data.
Correct.
Well, the opioid problem right now is out of control in this state. We've had so many deaths in the last year.
That's a great
It's
point.
been horrendous.
Yeah.
Yep. And you know, if you anecdotally, I don't think people have the study, but anecdotally, I think if you talk to the law enforcement, if you look at what's happening from an opioid standpoint, and as you said, in my daily practice, we prescribe a lot of opioids. You never see these problems with marijuana. Now, marijuana may not be embraced in the medical community as something you're writing a script for all the time, but I do believe that law enforcement would say to you, over a 20-year period, how many domestic assaults or armed robberies or violent crimes were the direct result of marijuana use versus alcohol, heroin, etc. It's not even a recordable blip compared to the other things.
People aren't dying because they're smoking marijuana.
Yeah.
People are dying because they're using opiates.
Sure.
And then
Much
there's a
more
lot of
powerful, them. Yeah. Again, I think a lot of people were torn. A lot of people have this view. You know, number one, we tried banning alcohol, and it didn't work. The problem was alcohol was legal, and we tried to make it illegal. And I think people are thinking the same way. If we legalized marijuana, and it turned out to be a catastrophe, can you put the genie back in the bottle? That's why everybody's looking at Colorado right now to see what happens. Is the whole place going to turn into chaos? Apparently not so far. But I think you're right. It would be a good funding source. It would ensure some kind of quality. It could be overlooked by the FDA or something.
And if we eliminated the national confusion, if this were a medication, if it could be sold as a medication, we wouldn't need compassion centers. You'd get it at the pharmacy.
Yeah.
It would be just like any other medication.
Now, having said all this, I really understand the people that are violently against any use of this stuff. But again, I think it goes back to education. Kids are not dumb. Kids are very smart. Show them the real data. And if, for example, somebody gave a speech, I guess, in Newport a couple weeks ago, and the guy said, you lose 4 or 5 of your intelligence, your IQ points, if you do this on a regular basis. If that's true, if I was a kid, I'd say, geez, my IQ is so low anyway, I don't want to lose any points. But I mean, it's stuff like that would get kids to, I think, look at alternative things to do. Anyway, my view, and I'm sorry to get on medical marijuana, we're jumping all around here. But let me ask you this, okay? So you guys get through this month. Now, when do you go on summer vacation?
Hopefully right around June 30th.
Yeah.
Okay, so June 30th, what are you going to do? Go to Disneyland or what?
I'm going to go out and watch them pull the gear off the gantry.
I'm not very handy, so I'm going to get some tools from him. And we'll be out there.
Okay, well, listen, you guys do great work, and please come back in the program. We'll give you your little hero outfits, your superheroes. You can kind of fly in to the studio. But really, seriously, thank you for all your hard work, time, effort, and everything else on this. This is a really great thing. Again, knock wood, we have a few days left, but I'll keep an eye on the press and along with everybody else. And thank you, gentlemen, both of you, for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
And this is Doug Smith signing off. Several of us went over to the UK to participate in some of the D-Day ceremonies over there. We'll be coming up with a separate edition of Portsmouth This Week that'll give you some idea of what we did. Signing off now. See you next time. Doug Smith. Bye-bye.